Hey! Hey, listen! You need 13 hearts in order to get the Master Sword. Hey! Huh? You have 13 hearts. You need to get the Master Sword. Oh, bye! Hey! Hey, listen! Whoops. Hello? Hey, you! In order to save Hyrule, you'll need to acquire the Master Sword, a legendary weapon, the only one that can defeat Dark Lord Ganondorf, and save Princess Zelda. Wah!
Yes, every single one of those events really happened. I know it's funny in hindsight, and honestly, it was kind of funny at the time, but that pales in comparison to the sheer frustration that we felt having to deal with a constant stream of people rolling into my videos and my streams trying to tell me exactly how to get the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild. I realize it's inevitable for streamers and YouTubers to have things spoiled for us in this manner, but unlike everyone that got to venture forth into post-Calamity Hyrule and eventually discover the Master Sword for themselves, I never did, and it kind of sucks. There was a very real magic to Breath of the Wild that I never got to experience, and I attribute a lot of it to the sheer amount of people trying to tell me where to go, what to do, and of course, how to get the Master Sword. Even if I was firing sword lasers with it at that very moment. And it's not just Breath of the Wild, it's practically every game I play, and it's kind of an issue. You can easily go and look at almost any of my videos or hang out on my streams, and invariably there will always be a handful of people either picking apart my strategy, shaming me for my mistakes, or just telling me what to do in detail. A lot of it is actually fairly polite, or even kind, but not always. Some are downright vile. But regardless of the tone, I think it's the sheer quantity that makes backseating grind my gears so gosh darn much. To some degree, this video will be a lot of me just venting my frustrations, but I'm gonna try and keep it informative, productive, and ultimately therapeutic. Mostly for me, but you're welcome to join in if it helps. I should also mention that while this video is pretty much a long condemnation of backseat gaming, I'm not really trying to make this video to pick a fight. I'm just trying to do it to illustrate why backseating is such a negative issue for me, and potentially for other content creators as well. So what is backseating? Backseating is short for backseat gaming, which is a direct derivation of backseat driving. In layman's terms, it means the act of giving unsolicited advice or directions from a position that is inconvenient to the driver, or player in this case. It's a very common occurrence in both Twitch chat and YouTube comments, and while it's often tolerated or even appreciated by some content creators, for many others it's an unwanted form of audience interaction that many of us wish would stop completely. Or if the backseaters would just read the rules, or simply ask beforehand, because, you know, it is the polite thing to do. Also, before we move on, apparently there's a word for this in Yiddish called kibitzing, which is to offer, often unwanted, advice or commentary, and it's absolutely perfect for this issue in every way. Just knowing that there's a specific word for this issue has really helped me wrap my head around it when scripting this video. It's not really relevant to this video beyond this section, but I just wanted to share such a cool word with you all. To drive my point home, let's take a look at a number of the most prolific types of backseaters that I have encountered over many years on both Twitch and YouTube. Not all of these are real, and for the ones that are, I've already banned or removed all of the source comments just in case anyone decides to go looking for them. And for people who have trouble listening to abusive language, you might just want to skip this section. YouTube comments can be brutally unkind, and these are some of the most onerous ones I've run into in the last few years.
I was cringing so hard when you said YouTube at 4:34. Pay more attention next time. It's YouTube, you swamp brain moron. How do you even make this kind of mistake? You're making YouTube videos, for crying out loud.
My dude, I made a small goof. I don't need you or anyone else to yell at me for small stuff like this. I get a lot of comments like these, usually pointing out a singular mistake, multiple, or just talking generally about how many mistakes I made during a video, or even just how hard it is to watch me play because I'm so bad at the game. Obviously, a lot of this is just the comment section being abusive as usual, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating to deal with. It's not like these people are necessarily wrong either. I do make a lot of mistakes when I play, either because I'm not paying attention, or because I'm always juggling 2 to 5 different games on a weekly basis and can't ever master any single one, or because I don't see the need to put my all into one specific game, or because providing entertainment commentary while playing a video game is actually kind of difficult, and that it easily takes up 50% of my brain power just not to go donuts, or just go silent entirely so I can actually focus. Have you actually tried this before? Are you just shooting from the hip, from the false throne that you've placed yourself upon, so you can feel somewhat superior to someone else for once? Okay, yeah, that was a bit much. I know for this job I have to have an incredibly thick skin to survive, but after years of not-so-casual abuse, any amount of stoic impassiveness that I trained myself to have has eroded into, if I'm honest, absolute distaste or white-hot rage depending on the day. You can still see it sometimes in almost every series where people are actively haranguing me for my mistakes. I'm not very polite with my responses. It's no excuse for being rude on my own end, but I have a very real complex around the words like misplay and cringe, or painful, and the mindset of anyone who uses them. Your cadence in this video is awful. You should really practice speaking out loud some more before hitting the record button, and even then I'm not sure if it'll do you any good. What you really should do is go over and watch all of Joseph Anderson's videos and learn how to make a good video essay instead of whatever this trash is. And for the record, how the hell did you get 7,000 views on this video? In my expert opinion, you probably bought 90% of them, if not more. Excuse me, but who are you again? I'm Corfarian12. Okay, and do I know you? And do you have much of a background in video essays? Well, no, but I've left a dozen comments on your videos telling you just how much you suck. And I plan on doing so until I eventually get bored of your videos and move on to someone else. Righto, Banhammer it is. What? No, how dare you? I'm your biggest fan! This is censorship! Honestly, this group is just an advanced form of the previous one. These are the people who go above and beyond in their efforts to deconstruct me and my actions, and usually in a way that's equal parts demeaning and outright insulting. I can take constructive criticism shockingly well, but let me tell you, these comments are anything but constructive. If it's somehow a mystery, constructive criticism is about building someone up, not tearing them down, which is called abuse. Anyone that ends up in this category usually gets banned pretty fast because, oh boy, I do not need this energy in my life. If I need criticism, I'll ask someone that I trust to give it well, not Corfarian12 on a random YouTube video.
Oh man, why didn't you notice that truck before boarding the SS Anne? Did you know that if you get surf before then, you can actually get over to it? And if you use strength on it, it'll move out of the way. And then there will be a Mew that you can catch underneath.
I had no idea. Are you absolutely sure?
Yeah, I was watching another streamer doing it right before coming here.
So I'm at the truck, and it ain't moving.
Maybe you're just doing it wrong? I'll look it up. Okay, so apparently you've got to get Missing No first, and have it use strength.
Yeah, no, this truck ain't budging.
I'm serious, dude. You must be doing something wrong.
There's no way this is working. I just looked it up, and there's no information on this being real. Have you even tried this yourself?
Well, no. I've never even played Pokemon, and I wasn't actually paying attention to that other streamer when they got it, so actually I have no idea what they did.
Then why send me on this inane goose chase in the first place?
Well, I saw it, and I thought it made sense at the time.
I hate these people. I have lost way more time than I'm comfortable with following the instructions of people that have no idea what they're talking about, and they always show up at the least opportune time. Like when I've already spent an hour or more trying to beat a boss, or I'm hopelessly lost, or I'm playing a softlock save file without realizing it, and then someone shows up with extreme confidence in their solution, only for it to either be a lie or wildly misinformed. I've gotten better at noticing these people, and for the most part they announce themselves way in advance anyway, but it still happens, and I hate it!
Pardon if this is long, but you passed by the cliffside entrance to the Sanguine Temple while collecting wood in the forest. Had you refrained from skipping the barkeep's dialogue last episode, you would have learned that the entrance to the temple, there'll be a cutscene where he bites your character before dying.
From the priestess.
Spoilers! You need two Wolfsbane to bring the priestess back alive.
Once you find the cave to the east of the Wolfsbane, you'll have enough reputation with the priestess for them to skip to your
There's a
hour.
time watch.
You must
These tasks include laundering their undergarments, baking quiches, but suffer the malodorous condition.
However,
Every task
has forgotten your
twice
password
to
to
let you
gain
gain
more
a
reputation.
To speak with
Once
the high
you drink the
priestess,
sanguine elixir,
she'll give you an
you'll be
iris in
permanently
exchange
granted
for
sanguine
information,
sight.
which allows you to see the hidden iconography of the Sanguine Temple cult. I hope this helps you find the entrance to the temple. Smiley face.
I just don't get this group. These are people that will actively tell me step-by-step instructions without end, unless I tell them to stop. And even then, they'll often resume their litany of commands after a couple of minutes of silence, or as soon as their timeout runs out. It honestly feels like they're trying to use me as a puppet to relive the game for the very first time, so I can somehow have the exact same experience that they had, and therefore validate their passion for the game. But all it ever does is make me feel deeply uncomfortable, and slowly poisons me against whatever game they're so passionate about. This is part of why I try to pre-record most of my series around launch week, mostly because of a particularly bad experience with my Undertale Genocide playthrough years ago, and is the reason why I never actually finished my series on it. When I did my pacifist playthrough, Undertale hadn't hit it that big yet, and while it was making its rounds as this awesome game that everyone should try, the fandom hadn't really established itself yet. But when I did my Genocide run a month later, the fandom was established and passionate. Almost immediately, I was bombarded by people telling me exactly where to go, what to do, and they were exceedingly pushy about guiding me to every single secret, Easter egg, reference, and secret boss, most of whom were well beyond my capability to beat at the time. And it was miserable. Sure, I could have shut them all down and continued on regardless, but by the time that I realized just how negatively this was affecting me, I was already too mentally and emotionally exhausted by them and the darker overtones of the route to care anymore. And honestly, I just didn't have it in me after I killed Papyrus in cold blood. Nowadays, since all of my content is recorded fairly close to a game's release date and then posted slowly on YouTube as a series, I can just sit back and ignore anyone trying to give me step-by-step instructions, because there's no reason for me to do so anymore anyway. Despite this, there's still tons of Prima Guides that still backseat aggressively, regardless of my content production style, and a small portion of them get big mad when I don't follow their directions to the letter. But since they generally seem to do it on a series that has been finished for months or even years, their anger is almost more humorous than it is impactful. I still wish they wouldn't do it though.
Hey Wander, try standing on the companion cube to get a bit of extra momentum.
Wait, that worked? What? So this group is an unfortunate casualty of all of the other backseaters and their effects on my mental and emotional health. Well-intentioned helpers are honestly the most common and have massively outnumbered every other group by a considerable margin for years. But despite my best efforts, I still have a dumb monkey brain that lumps the good in with the bad, and my knee-jerk reaction to even the most helpful of backseaters is to tell them to stop. If you're one of these people, I'm really sorry if I get terse. I appreciate you, though make sure you give me ample time to figure something out before you speak up. I don't want to be a remote-controlled game man. So why is backseating so bad? While I've painted a fairly negative picture of the practice already, let's break down a couple core reasons why backseating is so problematic, at least for me. Number 1, it's distracting. Honestly, this is my biggest sticking point with all forms of backseating. I really like chatting with my audience, and it's really hard to do so when most of my chat and comment section consists of people telling me what to do, or taking potshots at me, my playstyle, or my mistakes. There have been times where I actually need to hit the brakes and outright tell one or multiple people to either tone it down or cut it out entirely, and that's the last thing I ever want to do when I'm streaming. It's not fun for anyone when I do this, and it always drags everything down after the fact. Sure, I could just ignore it entirely, and I do 99% of the time, but even then, there are some occurrences that I just can't ignore anymore, especially when the backseating is turning outright demanding, or even abusive. There are certain series that I've done where I've never once looked at their comment sections, or the live chat, because there's no reason for me to do so. The sum total of the comments that I receive are purely just commands, demands, and criticism, and I just don't have the mental space or enough time in my day to process it all. Number 2. Backseating is often toxic. I realize I've said this multiple times over the course of this video, but I'm gonna drive it home here. This applies to comments in general, or on either platform, but the more toxicity that is thrown my way, the more bans I will gladly hand out. Sure, it is censorship, but come on. When I'm receiving comments like this, these, and this, it's no longer a discourse, it's just plain abuse. Like I said earlier, having thick skin is incredibly important to surviving on Twitch or YouTube, but at no point does that actually mean that a content creator should permit toxicity of this level within their community, and if they do, it becomes the norm. And I do not want this to become the norm on either of my channels. Because you know what they say, one bad apple spoils the bunch. Obviously, not all backseating is toxic. Most of it is actually quite alright. But man, the bad ones drag the rest down, if only by association. It's actually incredibly heartwarming seeing people shouting down toxic comments, and it really helps offset the negativity by a lot. But since I tend to go out of my way to filter and delete a lot of the worst comments before anyone even sees them, I don't get to see this happen very often. Number 3, backseating is usually unwanted, and more often than not, completely pointless. For most backseat gaming, I just don't need it. I'm actually pretty good at figuring out how games work within an hour or two, and while some nuance can always escape me, it rarely if ever slows me down. So when I have dozens of people telling me how to get the Master Sword, or that I need to use Flash to be able to see in the rock tunnel, I just get cranky. Because, you know, I will figure it out, eventually, and if I don't, oh well. Number 4, backseating can be well-intentioned. This one's hard for me, and potentially harder than having to deal with the more toxic side of backseating. I've had to ban a few very dedicated and largely wholesome fans in the past, because they couldn't stop themselves from micromanaging me if I was playing a game that they were knowledgeable about. And believe me, I tried very, very hard to let them down softly, to be firm with my boundaries, and was incredibly forgiving with them for breaking my rules endlessly just because they couldn't control themselves. In one specific case, I had to preemptively time out a fan before I even played certain games because I knew with absolute certainty that they would be insufferably controlling for the entire stream if I didn't. And at that point, I realized that this level of boundary enforcement wasn't healthy for me, and removed them from my channel and my community. And finally, number 5. I turned into a petty contrarian in response to backseating. Whenever someone commands me to do something, my knee-jerk reaction is to flagrantly disregard them and what they told me to do for as long as possible. And the more people that make demands, the less likely I am to ever do it, often to my detriment and other people's frustration. It's petty, I know, but I guess I do it to take back control over what I'm doing, so that I don't feel like I'm dancing for other people's amusement and not my own. And one last thing, I'm not allowed to say no. Well, okay, so I am 100% allowed to say no to backseating, but whenever I do so, I catch a decent amount of flack from one or multiple people telling me to stop. Most just don't want to hear me rebuke someone, but a fair portion are rather aggressively offended that I'm enforcing my boundaries at all. And when I say they get aggressively offended, I really mean it. People don't like to be told no, and while it's always difficult maintaining and enforcing my boundaries, both in meat space and on the web, it's at least 10 times harder when doing so is met with derision or yelling. I think these fans feel entitled to my content, and to me to some degree, and that because their comments have value to them, I should value them in turn. And to be told no, or to hear me telling someone else no, elicits such a negative reaction because it feels like I am rejecting them, that if I just chilled out and accepted them with open arms, everything would be perfectly fine. And from their perspective, everything would be. But boundaries are the bottom line. When it all comes down to it, so much of this issue is based on my own mental and emotional health, and setting healthy boundaries to keep myself from burning out. Because I can't really make entertaining content if I'm angry or upset about something, and it would be even harder to do so if I grew to hate my job entirely. Maybe I'm just being melodramatic, but I've seen far too many content creators crash and burn as a result of some toxic interaction either with their audience or the internet as a whole, and I'd rather avoid that grim fate if at all possible. So I've been going out of my way to draw this line of sorts between what kinds of interaction I'm okay with having with other people online and enforcing it when I need to. And you know what? It actually works. I don't get mad nearly as much anymore when people scream insults at me on a stream or in my comment section. I just screenshot them if they're particularly noteworthy from my extremely toxic scrapbook of hate. And then I ban them because I see no reason why I should ever allow more comments from someone like this on my channel ever again. Which is the other reason why this works so well. If there are no repeat offenders, there inevitably will be far less offenders overall. Sure, my comment section is probably a fair bit smaller compared to some other channels similar to my own, but I can still scroll through them without riding a roller coaster of negativity. By filtering out toxic elements from my audience, I found that most people that watch my videos are actually pretty dang wholesome, and I'm genuinely proud to see how nice people can be, which in turn lets me feel better, make better content, and keep my motivation levels high day in and day out. I've also started exploring other avenues of managing interactions like backseating in an attempt to prevent it from ever getting excessive in the first place. Obviously, word blacklists and spam filters work rather well, but I also yoinked an idea that my buddy Avac had called the Backseat Pass, where my live audience has to pay a considerable amount of channel points, a non-monetary currency based on watch time, to be able to give me advice or to tell me what to do. I set the price pretty high too, so people can't just redeem it very often, which really raised the quality of the backseating that I receive, because people don't want to waste the pass. This doesn't necessarily stop people from giving me wildly meaningless advice or just being rude, but by giving my audience a regulated avenue to backseat me, it's helped a lot. No clue how I'll ever do the same on YouTube, but comments there are a lot easier to ignore if I need to. Ultimately, backseating will likely continue to plague me for years, both in the ways that I've outlined in this video, as well as a multitude of entirely new and equally frustrating avenues that I can't even imagine at the moment. But at the same time, just having concrete coping mechanisms in place helps a lot. Even this video is a coping mechanism of sorts, and while I guess it equates to some form of content creator dirty laundry, speaking openly about my issues with backseat gaming has been incredibly empowering and has allowed me to drastically temper my own behavior when it happens. Hopefully, at least, by being upfront about how this sort of thing can negatively impact YouTubers and streamers, at least some people will examine their own behaviors and adjust how they interact with others. It doesn't have to be backseating either. I'll always be a major advocate for reducing toxicity online, no matter where, when, or why. Because I like this place a lot better when I don't have to worry about some bitter person rolling in to stink up my fun. And while it's probably a futile endeavor, I'll still try anyway. For now though, I hope you enjoyed me finally sitting down to explain why backseating grinds my gears so much, or at least found it interesting, and why my reaction to it is far more negative than you would normally expect. And if you did like this video, please hit that like button, it lets me know that I'm on the right track. And if you aren't already subscribed, please do so. I have a ton of these videos in store for the future, and I promise they won't all just be me bellyaching about the dark side of my job. But a lot of them will. Hey Wander, have you ever wanted to make your own game? If yes, what kind of game would you like to make? I have, and still do. I made a tower defense game back in college that was pretty bad, and I'd love to go back and make something incredibly deep in the genre, like somewhere between Risk of Rain, Nova Drift, and Bloons, but jammed into one game. Or a roguelike visual novel, which seems a hell of a lot more achievable with my skills and my time. Wonder, what's your opinion on boring Q&A questions? Honestly, the more interesting a question is, the more thought and time I have to put into answering them, so please send me some boring questions. I'm sorry, but who backseats a webcomic that doesn't even exist? I don't get these people!